also tuning in with one of my favorite human beings and musicians on the planet, none other than Mr. Rik Emmett. And you're out promoting this book, and you can see I've already have mine's a little tattered and all that kind of stuff. And the title
dog-eared is good, man. Yeah. Coffee stains, places where you threw it down in disgust and it went across the floor. Yeah.
I've enjoyed this a lot. And I mean, fans that have followed your solo career in your forum, I mean, this is a lot of stuff that you touched on in the forum. So there's certain things that I wasn't necessarily surprised about, some things that I'd forgotten. But, you know, as a starting point, I don't know if you remember, but years ago when you decided to stop touring, you mentioned it to me first, and I actually emailed Rick Wharton and I said, Rick, you know, Rik Emmett told me that he's not touring any longer. Can I run this in the article? And he says, oh yeah, absolutely. And then he told me in Batavia, New York, which is right near where I live, he said, man, he told you before he told me. And what's great is in this book, I think you give a lot more insight into that decision. And it really wasn't an easy one for you, was it? I mean, it was to a certain degree.
No, I had always thought that I'd always thought that I would stop teaching. I would quit going on the road and still teach. But I actually, when we moved, it made it so that the commute into the college, at the beginnings of the week, that was starting to become something I was going, man. And it was just whole the stress and anxiety thing that I was going, lesson plans and marking and grading and, curriculum meetings with faculty. And I was just going, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to let that go, because I had gigs on the books that were still like, there was going to be some decent money to be made. And I went, it's hard to turn that down and say no to that. But then even just going out on the road and the traveling and going to hotels and airports and, all of that kind of stuff, I was just going, yeah, this is starting to get to be too much too. So, and in any case, I gave it all up, and then COVID came along anyhow. And, that made it so that nobody could go out on the road anymore anyway. So I thought, well, that was pretty good timing, but it was an accumulation of stress. Now, as far as, when these things come up, I do tend to be a fairly transparent kind of person. So if something's in my mind and I'm talking to somebody, I'll just say what comes to my mind. I don't really try to hide things. So it probably was just a question of, I talked to you before I talked to Spud, so in the conversation with you, it comes up. The next time I talk to Spud in the conversation, it might come up, it might not, but I guess at some point I probably said to him, oh yeah, well, I told Thom that. I guess I better tell Spud, Yeah.
Well, Spud, I know he's been dealing with some health issues, so hopefully he's doing well, and certainly send him my well wishes. He's always stayed in communication with me. Just a wonderful guy, always a great conduit. And you and I've interviewed you, man, probably a dozen times at this point, and he's always been very quick to set it up. But yeah, he was so cool about it.
Let me give you an update there, sir. So let me give you an update. I talked to him yesterday on the phone for a fair chunk of time, and he is doing better. He's still in the hospital, and he's still, he's still got issues. Hopefully, maybe in the beginning of next week, they might be able to send him home and let him, be dealing with things on his own. But yeah, it's been a kind of a rough go, and he's been operated on twice,
Oh, wow.
So yeah, as they're trying to sort of solve these issues and figure out what's going on. But anyways, he was lucid. He was still on some painkillers, but he, as you sort of described, he's a very people kind of person, and he really does live for conversation. That's kind of what he's all about. So, the fact that we could get to talk on the phone again for a bit, it was like, oh, okay, he's coming back. So I felt good. Yeah.
Well, that warms my heart to hear. He's a great guy, funny stand-up comedian as well. I mean, just uber talented. And you guys, I mean, I think Rik Emmett, I think Rick Wharton, I think Dave Dunlop. I mean, those are the people that pop into my head, even more so than, the Gilmore and Mike Levine, because I think I've followed your solo career much longer than I have the whole Triumph stuff. But there's a couple of things in the book that I didn't know, which were kind of shocking. I mean, that you talk about real personal stuff like your bridge mortgage, and I think it was interesting how you say, yeah, I'm not this multi-billionaire rock star. Like, I still deal with financial issues. My wife works and we have health insurance and all that kind of stuff. But you had another brother that passed away, your older brother, Robert, I believe is the name, if I remember correctly. And then Dave also lost his wife. So, I mean, even before you made the decision to stop touring, like you said, there was just a lot going on personally. And that's, I don't know, it's tough,
Yeah.
but
I didn't go into it in a lot of detail in the book, but for sure, one of the big stresses was my dad, and becoming Jeanette and I became sort of principal caregivers for my dad. And it was a long, slow decline. And then in the end, there was sort of dementia during the COVID period. So that whole thing was just really, almost grotesque in the way that it was playing out, and the stress and the anxiety that it created. Now, I mean, no one escaped from COVID unmarked. I think everybody had to pay a price on one level or another. But if you had an aging parent that was in a home, and then, oh, you got to put on a face shield, and, they phone and they go, oh, he's had a fall. He's kind of split his head open. And I go in to see him, and he looks like you remember the old Christmas Carol movie where Jacob Marley would visit him and he had the towel wrapped around his head in order, like the old thing in Victorian England, to keep the jaw closed. They would, and so I go and I walk in to see my dad, and he's sitting there. He's got this thing. He looked like Jacob Marley with this knot tied on the top of his head. And I'm just going, oh man, this is just crazy, weird, bizarre. It'll take me a long time not to have this in my nightmares, like it was it was a bad thing. And bad stuff happens to everybody. I think in the book, I kind of wanted to make sure that I was touching on these kinds of things. Just because you're a rock star and you can put a picture of yourself on the cover when you were in your prime and everybody's going, hey, look at that, it's jumping around in the spotlight. There's a big difference between what real life is like and that stuff. And I had both. And I wanted to make sure that everybody got a really good understanding of the fact that, real life tragedy happens and it visits you, and you have to get over it. I had a nice moment. I didn't put this in the book either, but my son, he played baseball at Central Michigan University. He was on a scholarship, but he tore his, he had to have Tommy John surgery, and that made his sort of, university career another year longer, because he wanted to go back and play, even though, because he'd lost, pretty much a whole season to that. And he was the kind of kid that was going to become the captain of the team. There's no question. Like, he was a leader kind of human being. And I think that when they given him the scholarship, I think they kind of felt like, yeah, this is a guy that by the time he reaches his senior year, this will be, somebody that the whole team will rally around, and he'll kick ass and keep everybody in line and show, he'll lead by example, which is, all of those kinds of things that you need leaders to do. So anyhow, he gets to make the big speech at the end of year banquet when all the seniors are graduating. And there's going to be a lot of tears, because there's going to be a lot of these guys that their dreams are over, But in his speech, he talked about having to go through that, the difficulty of that Tommy John thing, and how when I was with him and we were driving to the hospital or whatever was going on, or he was coming home from it or something, that I had said to him, look, it's not about getting kicked and lying down on the ground. It's not about when you're down. It's about, and it's not even about getting up, because you have to get up. You're going to get up. But then what are you going to do after you get up? Because that's how you define who you are, And I hope that my book would be something that would, tell those kinds of stories. Because, let's face it, I went through a lot of shit,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
being in a band that was successful and then deciding I'm going to leave it. Man, that was not easy. That was a tough one, but it was nothing compared to the ones that are the really personal ones. When your wife gets breast cancer, or when she's in a car accident and breaks her neck and is on a striker frame in a hospital bed for 6 weeks. Those are the things that they test you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And you, Mike, I tell you, the book, it's in even though you talk about these things on a very personal level, you do bring it back to some very hopeful ways and different perspectives. I think I remember what was it, the Willie Nelson quote that you had in there in terms of dealing with grief, and ironically, my family's going through some challenging times with a young family member who's dealing with cancer, and I'm sure you can empathize with that. And I was just listening to Marco's Secret Songbook, thinking about this interview, and the song Hope came on, and I thought, man, that's a song that in some ways really encapsulates the theme of the book. It's like, yes, there's all this stuff, and I think there may be people that are sort of curiosity seekers going, gee, well, what happened with Triumph? But that's not really what the book's about. The book is more about, here's some things to think about. And I love how you weave in occasional, tiebacks to some of the lines in songs, about things being free and, from Fight the Good Fight or Magic Power or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's a great read. And I'm sure I think it's part philosophy, part music business manual, part, grief counseling. I think you talked about some therapy that you went through and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's an intense read. I mean, it really is, in a really good way, but very intense.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I you're going to do a memoir, right? A Rockstar memoir. And so, and obviously, that kind of a picture is going to be on the cover. And, I find it a little ironic that if you, Google to buy it at Amazon or whatever, when the thing comes up, at the font, it'll say like, lay it on the line, Backstage Pass to Rockstar, blah, 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 blah. But then the word Triumph is in all caps, and it's in a larger font than all the rest
Yeah.
of the stuff. And I go, okay, like there's no question that that's the thing that's going to initially, sell books, because people go, oh, the guy that wrote Late on the Line. Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be interesting, but that curiosity factor, I did not want to just have a book that was going to be about that. I've never been that kind of an artist. I didn't
Right.
write songs that were just going to be, hey, I hope this gets on the radio. Hey, I hope this, like I wanted a song to have. And I used to tell this to songwriting students all the time. Try to give people something that money can't buy. Go there, like make that be a goal of what you're trying to do, So, when I wrote the book, the challenge was, obviously ECW Press, they're not like a giant, they're not going to be able to say, look, Keith Richards, Bono, go ahead, make the book this thick. You've got carte blanche. I was thinking ECW, they probably don't want it to be much more than 200 pages. They want to, they want to keep their printing costs down, and I'm going, and then they were my guy, Michael Holmes, he was a great editor, and he's become a friend. And he said, like, no, man, you're a good writer. I want you to write, and I really want you, if you want it to be meaty, big, and bouncy, as the Who would say, you go ahead and do it, And so that was reassuring. It was a nice thing that I felt, okay, I can make this be much more than just a memoir about what it was like to be a rock star. I can make it be a memoir about what it was like to be a rock star that was hoping that it would open lots of other doors, and I would get the chance to do other things. And then just the whole idea of, I'm now 70 years of age. And when I was writing it, I was 68, 69, and you go, okay, that's a pretty good life. Like I've had a nice run, what has it taught me? What kind of a life what have I learned from that kind of a life? And I wanted the book to be about that. Now, having said all this, Thom, my wife, she shows me something where, there's a review, like, I don't know, on Amazon,
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like some guy goes, this is bullshit. Like I wanted to read about Triumph, and I wanted to, and there's the picture on the front and the title, like this is all it's misleading. This is not, and so the guy, and I go, okay, a legitimate kind of a complaint, but because the cover is probably a little misleading. But if I had put a cover on it that was really a cover that represented what was inside, then nobody would have been interested in stocking it in bookstores. Like it never would have,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have had the nice bump, and it's had a nice bump out of the gate. It's done very well the first couple of months. So I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to have to take that criticism and go, fair enough. You're probably right, but clearly, you don't know me. If you knew
Yeah.
me and you bought the book, like I know that you know me, and
Right.
so when you get the book and you go, hey, this is, and then I'm particularly gratified when somebody who knows me as well as you do can go, wow, this book, there's a lot in it. Then I go, great, good. So, I did accomplish what I set out to do.
Well, it's been your whole solo career. You've had these people that will come along and just, I don't want to use the term don't get it, because musical taste is subjective and not everybody likes everything, but they created this persona of Rik Emmett in the jumpsuit, which is when I first saw you. I first saw you in that red jumpsuit in Rochester Auditorium Theater on the, Progressions of Power tour, and flash pots, and dude, look at this dude with the, long hair and all that kind of stuff. But that's not you anymore. And your solo career has been such an interesting ride. But yeah, you've always bucked up against that. In fact, you've got a new album coming out with the highlights from Absolutely, Ipso Facto, and the Spiral Notebook. And to me, like the Spiral Notebook, that was the album that divided everybody. That was a divide and conquer. That was where the old Triumph fans go, oh, look at Rick going adult contemporary. And the rest of us said, yeah, didn't he have like Take My Heart on Progressions of Power? Isn't this just a further exploration of the stuff that he was foreshadowing in his Triumph era? Wow, this is really cool, But yeah, I think that's you obviously know it better than I do, but I think that just kind of comes with the territory.
It does, yeah. And there's just no way that the way that the music business works, there's just no way that people are really going to know what your life is like from the other side of the equation. Now, and I'm going to revisit something that you mentioned, because you're talking about the song Hope. And when I wrote that,
yeah, I love that song.
My brother, I got to play that song for my brother Russell. We were at a cottage together. It was the last summer we were going to be together, kind of thing. He knew it, I knew it, but I'd written that song sort of about what he was going through and what he was, holding on to for dear life, kind of, and so and I got to play it for him sitting, so that kind of a thing that's why I live for music. That's the, that's the meat that's on the bone, but you can't really get folks to understand that. They're only ever going to see, the things that kind of superficially happen, because, hey, life is, it's happening fast and it comes at you in a hurry, and everybody's got their own things, their own concerns, their own things that they're focused on and that consume them. So then this other kind of stuff, oh, Rik Emmett's got a book. Oh, great. It doesn't really, register. So I'm grateful for the fact that some folks really do, sit down and read it and go, oh, I'm going to give this as much depth as it deserves, or as it asks. You can only, as an artist, you can only offer. I can't dictate. I can't command. I can't make the market respond in the way that I would like it to. Like, I don't have that power, so I just go, well, what do I have the power to do? I have the power to write, so that's what I'll do.
Well, I'll tell you that section that you write about the last moments, sitting there with your brother Russell, was very moving in a very beautiful way. And yeah, anybody that's lost somebody that's very dear to them, and they have those moments, you know, it's gut wrenching, but again, like you presented in a way that was very hopeful. And the fact that you played that song for him just gives it much more meaning for me, because, you know, every song is very meaningful. But I mean, I think in some ways Marco's Secret Songbook kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It was an album that if people missed it, you know, it's a shame, because that's my favorite Rik Emmett solo project. I haven't decided whether I like it with or without the narration better. I think it actually flows better with the narration, but you know, because the songs come together with the narration a little bit better, and I wish you'd make it into a play or something someday. But that was one thing. To come back to the book, that I was like, holy crap, Steve Howe, you reached out Steve Howe. And I think the funniest line in the whole book, and I apologize, folks, it's a spoiler, when you said, oh, the guy from Tales from Topographic Oceans thinks this is too wild of a concept.
No, well, the expression he used was that I'd gone off the deep end. And so I go, the guy that wrote Tales from Topographic Oceans is telling me I went off the deep end? Oh, okay. Well, you know, okay, fair enough, you know. Yeah, I mean, in that circumstance, I mean, I don't bear any malice to, you know, Steve Howe was a hero of mine, you know, a role model for me. So, you know, in that, I probably was reaching way too far too fast, you know, to pitch him on that level for a project like that was at that stage. And, you know, probably if I had a much larger kind of career profile, because Howe did do some collaborations, but he did them with folks like Martin Taylor as a British jazz guitar player, and they did a project together. And I go, oh, okay. Like you know, if I'd have been Chet Atkins and I'd pitched him, I think he would have paid attention to me a little bit more. So
yeah. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Being a fan of both, yes, and your work and everything. I just thought it was really funny. I mean, and I was part of the reason too. I went back to listen to it again. I was trying to figure out where Howe would have fit in, but I think it would have been a very, very different project musically. But I mean, that thing's got like bossa nova in it. It's got, you know, there's some rock songs in it. It really does, to me, feel like, even from a story perspective, and we talked about it when it first came out, it would just be such a great like Broadway play, or even like, I don't know, a Disney movie. You know, it has this weird kind of uplifting sort of Disney narrative. And I say that because I've got a 5-year-old granddaughter, and I've started watching a lot of Disney again. So don't take that as a bad thing.
No,
I think it's,
in fact, when I wrote it, when it was conceived, I did think of it that way. And I did even sort of send copies to people that are like, you know, in that world of Broadway shows, and lawyers that handled the deals that get cut, of what shows might, you know, get developed so that they can be sort of off Broadway and then maybe have a chance to turn into something bigger. And it was just like, whenever I send it out to anybody, like I sent it out to a guy, he will remain nameless, but he's a guy that was connected into the publishing industry in a large way. And when he heard it, he said, I don't know what you're trying to do here. He says, I don't know if this is supposed to be just as you described. He said, I don't know if this is supposed to be like for kids and be a you know, a movie or a stage play or something, or I don't know if this is just music or songs. The songs don't seem like they're you know, nothing is got hit parade written on it. So I don't know what you're driving.
I disagree with that.
Yeah,
there's a couple of real good gems on there, pop wise too. Yeah.
Well, you know, yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I know that you're a fan of my stuff, so you know, it's good. That's your perspective. It's a great one. I thank you for it. But generally speaking, I think the world looked at it and kind of went like, have no idea what this is, don't care, goodbye. You know, so
yeah. Well, I think that was an exposure piece, though, don't you think? I think there's certain albums that if people hear them, they become more popular. I just don't think that was. It's like anything. I mean, you're right about the music industry in here too. I think there's just, if somebody perceives an artist to be a certain way and they do something different, then you get to the promo team. And this is where it's been good you've worked with Rick Wharton, because Rick gets you. And, you know, but if somebody doesn't get you, they just go, well, how the hell do we promote this? Isn't this the, you know, like you said, the guy in the spandex? Like, what's he trying to do? Write a Broadway play? You know, who's going to listen to this? And
I think part of it is the way that the industry is constructed, and there's people that kind of get to sit at the top of a kind of a trickle down,
Yeah.
a mountain of, and they're right up on the peak. And you've got your folks like, hey, geez, David Bowie, Madonna, Springsteen, Bono, and those folks can reinvent themselves in whatever way they sort of decide they're going to, and then they force the business model underneath them to accept the fact that they go, no, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm going to make it so that, say in Madonna's case, MTV won't be able to say no to me because I'm going to be doing something that is going to work for this next generation of people that are coming. And that game has to be played by your Beyoncés of the world. And, once you've, like, Taylor Swift will be playing this sort of game now she's never going to be more popular than she is right now. Like, she's right at the top of the mountain. But then she's going to start reinventing, because those people that just loved her when they were 12, 13 years old, they're not going to be 12 or 13 anymore,
Yeah.
And she's not going to be her age reaching them with whatever the equation is that she's established that's working so well, like that's going to change, and then it'll become a question of, well, then, how do you reinvent yourself? It was interesting to watch, like I'm a big fan of John Mayer, and he went through a thing where, he'd had all this incredible success, and a lot of his audience were young women, who
Yeah.
who liked the fact that he was talking about their body being a wonderland, and they were thinking, geez, I wish he'd think my body was a wonderland. And that's one way that pop music works.
Yeah.
That kids are going through that whole thing about their bodies and their hormones, and so they're finding expression for that. And music is often the thing that you cotton to it. I mean, hey, when I was a kid and the Beatles happened, there certainly was, like, I go, right, you could play, I think I said this in the book, you can play guitar and be sitting behind the bandstand in the Lawrence Welk show. And that's one thing, and I like it, and it was cool. But when the Beatles are playing, the girls are screaming. And I go, oh, no, that's for me. that's what I want to do, And so that hormonal thing is there, but then at a certain point as an artist, you're not really trading on that anymore. You're starting to trade on something else, So I was never able to necessarily make that happen in an industry way, but I was able to do it in an indie kind of way, off the beaten path, my own little kind of world, my own fans, my own little website, flying under the radar, guerrilla warfare. That was kind of how it had to work,
Yeah, I mean, it definitely worked. I mean, it's a catch-22, I suppose, in terms of, what would you rather have, a small loyal fan base that kind of gets you, and or this massive fan base where you make a ton of money and never have to worry about anything for the rest of your life. I don't know, maybe somewhere in between.
Yeah, that's kind of it,
Yeah.
And of course, that as you just described it, that never goes away. When I was in music business with students, I would say, here it is, on the one side, you have this artist, I have integrity, I will not compromise. On this other side, you have commerce, you have industry, and the first day of class, I would walk up to the board and I would write on it when I would put, music is spiritual, period. The music business is not. Van Morris. And I would say, you see that? I said, there's another phrase that, people say all the time. The word music, this long, the word business, this long. Which is the longer word? That's the equation of how it works. The business is going to dominate, and you just have to accept that. You have to know that that's the reality of it. And, but, I also used to say to them, look, this is about process. If you like doing the process, then you're not necessarily all that crazy concerned about the paycheck. And as long as the paycheck is enough that you keep getting the chance to do the process, you're going to be happy. There's I think Steve Swallow was the musician that said, If you want to be in the music business, don't, because it's horrible. But if you need to be in the music business, then go ahead, because it's going to be the greatest job you could ever have, you know? And I think that's the truth of it. Like, if you're really driven and music is just something that you can't live without, you really want to be making it. And I think I'm reading a book now by the guy, Jeff Tweedy, Wilco, the book is called The World Within a Song, I think. And, you know, I mean, he's from a very different kind of background than I am, a punk kind of attitude kind of guy, right? And alt rock and alt country and all of that stuff. But yeah, he's I when I read his stuff, I go, you know what? He's the same as me, you know, like
Yeah.
he can't live without it, and neither could I. It's just what drew me to it. Like, there's no jazz in Tweedy's thing. He wasn't that kind of a guy, you know. But for me, classical guitar was almost there right from the beginning. So the idea of being able to play things really well on a virtuoso kind of level almost, that was important to me. To him, he would sneer at that, you know, he would find that stupid, and, you know, but he's still driven in exactly emotionally the same thing. He needs it like he needs oxygen, you know, and I go, I get that. Like, I totally get that.
Yeah, my son, my youngest son, has either read or is reading that book, because we were just talking about that fairly recently. So
There you go.
interesting. And he was, I mean, one of his first concerts was a Rik Emmett show. It's he was yelling "Taste of Steel" in Buffalo, and you came out and did the encore for him and gave him the pick. In fact, I got the picture and the pick and everything from that particular moment. That was quite the funny moment, because you had come out and said, well, this kid's been pestering me for this, you know, solo song, and I'm going to play it. So that was a great moment. So I usually do with interviewees, if you don't mind, well, to kind of wrap it up, it may take a little while, it may not, just show you some records. And every one of these records I'm about to show you has a mention in the book. So maybe it'll stimulate some interesting conversation. Let's start with this one, The Origin of the Spelling of Rik Emmett.
Yes. Yeah. You know, there's Mike on my left side there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he was the producer of that record. So, and he owed me some money, and he'd written me a check, and he'd spelled my name R-I-C. And then when he were putting the credits together, for the back, and he called me, and I said, hey man, you better put a K on the end of my name. You know, you put R-I-C on the check. And so then he took the C off and he put a K instead. And then the jackets got all printed. And I went, what have you done? I've become Scandinavian, you know. Okay, fine, whatever. It's funny, you know, like when you're in show business, in my book, I talk about the mask, you know, and
yeah.
But the whole thing of being R-I-K, it was kind of like this cartoony version of me. When I was a little kid, I was Ricky. And then I go to school and I was Richard. And then everybody at school, I was always a Richard to everybody that ever knew me through school. But my family always called me Rick. And then when I was in high school and I was running track, I got this nickname Rocket because of Rocket Richard playing hockey. And then a friend of mine started calling me Rocket. Well, then I was Rocket to everybody that knew me really well. They would call me by my nickname, or you know, guys that were jocks and stuff. And so, but then this thing happened in Triumph where R-I-C-K became R-I-K. And then I go, well, in a way, this is now just a part of the mask. You know, this spelling of my name is like, I'm like Cher, or I'm Bono, or, you know, I'm an artist of one name. I'm an artist of, you know, 3 letters now, you know. Okay, I'm Rick, R-I-K, fine, you know. And in a way, it's good because it kind of, you can distance yourself. You go, yeah, well, that's not the guy that's on my driver's license, you know. That's Richard Gordon Emmett, you know. That guy Rick Emmett with only a K, he's the cartoon guy, you know.
Yeah, I'm THOM is my writing pseudonym. I mean, I'm Thomas, so I can relate on a certain level. Now we got this one. This one you talk a lot about just the it was almost a therapeutic experience. I had no idea like how much this process really meant to you.
Yeah, look at that picture, okay? I want you to look at that picture, and I want you to look at Dave Dunlop. His wife had died less than a month less
Wow.
than his wife had only been dead 2.5 weeks. And he said, I got to play these gigs, Rick. I got to go out on the road. I got to play this. So you got to throw me a life preserver. I need it. And
Yep.
so we were
That's
there for
that's
Dave.
Dave for everybody out there. So yeah.
Yeah, it was tough, but it was also it was really good because it was therapeutic, as you say. Plus, I mean, never mind Dave, like just for me, how many guys get to in their mid-60s and somebody goes, "Hey, you want to make an album? Here's a budget. You can do the exact record you want to make." And I went, "Okay, wow, that's a great thing. Yes, okay, I'll do it." And so that's it. It's a kind of a blues rock record in a way. There's a
Yep.
kind of a bluesy sense to it, very classic rock kind of, but that's my guts. That
Yeah,
record,
no, yeah, it's a great one. I know you did the bonfire sessions afterwards, but in terms of just a proper album release, it's really nice. I mean, that's kind of your bookends there. You got that first Triumph record, and then the Res 9. So then we already talked about this guy. I know this is a band that was really important to you too. I didn't realize you were a Gentle Giant fan too. I was almost going to put a Gentle Giant record in there. I
yeah,
Triumph was never really categorized as progressive rock, but I think songs like The City and of course, Blinding Light Show and maybe some of the early stuff, there really was, and even maybe Carry On the Flame to a certain degree on
yeah,
Surveillance. You had a lot of prog elements in there.
yeah. And it was a type of music that I really liked, and I think in the end it also helped sort of elevate Triumph in a certain way above other kinds of heavy metal rock bands.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Gil and Mike, if they'd picked a different guitar player, they would have had a different kind of Triumph. But they
Mm-hmm.
picked me, and so I'm trying to drag in a little bit of that kind of stuff. That album in high school, I can remember us sitting around and smoking dope and listening to that record, and wow, Starship Trooper and Yours Is No Disgrace, and like, man, and that had the clap on it, if I
Yep,
recall correctly. So
that is
like,
correct.
that was kind of one of those records where I was just going, oh man, like this is the kind of band someday when I grow up, I want to be in a band like that. So I was trying to sort of have Triumph in that image, become a band like that. But I'd sort of have to, fit it in here and there, push at the other guys to get them. There was some records where, like, for example, the Thunder 7 album, uh, those guys were off fighting getting out away from RCA, then shopping the records. So they were so busy that they weren't around the studio much. So I was making Time Cannon and writing songs like Stranger in a Strange Land and recording Little Boy Blues on my own and Midsummer Daydream. And so I was having this, it was kind of like there's a fair chunk of Thunder 7 where you go, oh, that's Rick being Rick, that he's going to become, because he's figuring out how to play in the studio and use multi-tracks and and edit guitar pieces. And yeah, so but the other guys weren't around. So but you held up the Yes album. If you'd have held up Fragile, you would have that's an album where each guy got a chance to do a solo thing.
Yeah.
So again, the studio becomes a playground for an artist that's going, I'm a recording artist, I'm going to make art through recordings. It's not the same thing as I'm going to have hit songs for the hit parade. It's a very different kind of dynamic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love Yes, and it's obviously Steve Howe's work. My youngest son Trevor was named after Trevor Rabin because your family did R's for all the boys. I did T's for all my boys. So
Right on.
that's otherwise I would have had a Rick. But
There you go.
this one, of course, winds up on your list of the best produced albums. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, sonically, this thing is a masterpiece, and you definitely take care in terms of your solo records and even the Triumph records. I mean, they were all really well mixed. They were just all good sounding albums. But I mean, this one's pretty special.
It is, often when soundmen are squeaking out the PA at live gigs, they'll use Steely Dan records to do it because they're just so tidy, they're so clean, they're so well mastered and engineered, like to perfection. Yeah, and I want to I think the Triumph Just a Game album was a little bit more, it was a little cleaner audio wise than, Gil really wanted drums to get big and huge. And of course, Steely Dan was like, they liked the drums to be important, but they kept them really dry and they kept them really tight. And, that's a whole different approach to making records. Gil wanted drums to make records be big and huge. And, Steely Dan was all about, no, you make everything fit into its, area. And yeah. Thom, I'm gonna have to kind of cut this. I just gotta think.
Okay.
I've got a friend I've got to go pick him up at the train station. He wasn't supposed to be there till 4 o'clock. And on my phone here, I'm seeing the thing and I go, what? You're at the train station already? So,
no worries at all. You've been very generous with our time. I'm sure our paths will cross again. And my wife just had one request. She says, you need to come back to the States and play one more song for us, or one more show for us. But I know you're not gonna, but she does send her best. And
the guy that owns the Riviera Theater in where is that now?
North Tonawanda.
Tonawanda. He keeps Kathleen Wagner, she still works for me and does stuff, for my web or for my social media stuff. And she says to me, every 3 months, hey, guy from the Riviera, you can write your own ticket there. What do you want to do? And I go, I know, but geez, I mean, I don't pay my union dues anymore, So as far as a work visa, crossing the border would be a strange adventure that I know nothing about because I haven't done it since before COVID. So, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I'm going to Sweden for New Year's. So if I can do that, maybe I'll do some other stuff. Who knows?